There's a forest in northeastern Arizona that contains thousands of logs lying scattered across the desert landscape. Except they're not wood anymore, they're crystalline quartz, agate, and jasper, perfect cylinders of gemstone weighing tons, some over 60 meters long. The official explanation is petrification, wood buried in volcanic ash, slowly replaced by minerals over millions of years until every cell structure became stone. This process is well documented in laboratory conditions, but when you examine these specific logs closely, problems emerge. Problems that the standard explanation cannot address. The logs show saw marks, clean straight cuts that slice through solid crystalline quartz. The wood grain patterns are too perfect, too regular. The chemical composition includes elements that don't occur in petrified wood. And most problematic, the logs aren't rooted. They're lying on the surface, oriented in ways that suggest placement rather than natural fall. These aren't petrified trees. They're something else, something that challenges everything we think we know about ancient technology and pre-colonial civilizations in North America. The Petrified Forest National Park was established in 1906 to protect these formations from collectors who were hauling away tons of material for commercial sale. The logs had been known to local Native American tribes for centuries. The Navajo called them stone trees and had oral traditions explaining them as trees that turned to stone when they died. Early American settlers in the 1870s treated them as geological curiosities. Scientists arrived in the 1880s to study them. By the 1890s, the petrification theory was established. Ancient trees from the Triassic period, buried in volcanic sediment, slowly mineralized over 225 million years. This timeline was based on the sediment layers the logs were supposedly found in, and the presence of dinosaur fossils in the same formation. But there are problems with this timeline that careful observation reveals. First, the logs are not embedded in ancient sediment layers. They're lying on the surface. Park literature explains this as erosion exposing them. Wind and water wore away millions of years of overlying rock, leaving the harder quartz logs on the surface. This explanation requires the logs to be harder than the surrounding sandstone and mudstone. Quartz is indeed harder. But it's also brittle. A 60-meter log of solid quartz lying on the surface for thousands of years, while softer rock around it erodes, should fracture from thermal stress. The temperature in Arizona deserts varies by 50 degrees Celsius between day and night. This expansion and contraction should crack brittle crystalline material, yet many logs show no fracturing. They're intact, smooth, perfect cylinders. Second, the logs show uniform diameter for their entire length. Real trees taper. They're wider at the base and narrow toward the top. These logs maintain consistent diameter. Some taper slightly, but the taper doesn't match biological growth patterns. It matches manufactured cylinders. When trees fall, they break. Branches snap off. The trunk fractures at weak points. These logs broke at 90-degree angles. Clean breaks perpendicular to the length. No splintering, no irregular fracture patterns. Breaks that look like they were cut. The saw marks are the most direct evidence of artificial processing. On several logs throughout the park, you can see straight lines scored into the quartz surface. Park rangers explain these as natural fracture planes in the crystal structure. But crystal fracture planes don't form parallel lines spaced at regular intervals. They don't form patterns that match saw blade tooth spacing. The marks are shallow, only a few millimeters deep. Whatever made them cut into solid quartz, which requires diamond-tipped tools or laser cutting in modern industry. The Triassic period had neither. Neither did any human civilization we acknowledge existing in North America before European contact. The wood grain patterns present another problem. Petrification preserves cellular structure. You should see growth rings, variations in cell size, knots where branches attached, irregularities from environmental stress during growth. Some logs show these features, but many show wood grain that's too regular. Perfect parallel lines running the length of the log with no variation. This doesn't occur in natural wood. Trees respond to wind, drought, disease, competition for light. These factors create irregular growth patterns. Manufactured veneer or composite materials show regular grain because they're made that way. These logs show the same regularity. The chemical composition is wrong for petrified wood. Standard petrification replaces organic material with silica, usually quartz. The petrified forest logs contain quartz, but also significant amounts of other minerals not typically present in petrified wood. Iron oxide creating red colouring, manganese oxide creating purple and black, carbon in crystalline form, copper compounds creating blue and green. This rainbow of colours makes the logs beautiful and commercially valuable. But it's geochemically unusual. Where did all these elements come from? The volcanic ash theory says they were present in groundwater and got incorporated during mineralization. But the concentrations and combinations don't match what you'd expect from random groundwater chemistry. They match what you'd expect from deliberate alloying or material engineering. The orientation of the logs is suspicious. In a natural forest knocked down by volcanic eruption or flood, trees fall in the direction of the force. They should show directional alignment. The petrified forest logs point in random directions. Some are parallel, some perpendicular, some scattered with no pattern. This randomness suggests they weren't growing in place when they fell. They were already cut and moved before being left in their current positions. The fact that they're on the surface, not buried, supports this. Something placed these logs here recently enough that they haven't been buried by natural sediment accumulation. There's a pattern of similar formations across the American Southwest. Utah has petrified logs, New Mexico has them, Nevada has them. They all show the same characteristics: crystalline quartz, regular dimensions, surface positioning, saw marks. Standard geology explains each site independently as lucky preservation of Triassic forests. But the pattern suggests something else. A distribution of processed silicon material across a wide region. If these are remnants of ancient construction, what were they part of? The scale is enormous. Individual logs weigh 20 to 30 tons. Moving them requires advanced equipment. Cutting them requires diamond tools or better. Creating the regular dimensions requires precision manufacturing. This level of technology didn't exist in pre-Columbian America, according to mainstream archaeology. The Tartaria theory provides context. The idea that an advanced global civilization existed in the recent past was destroyed by a cataclysm and was systematically erased from history. Evidence of this civilization appears as anomalous artifacts and structures that don't fit standard chronology. Massive stone buildings with no historical record of construction. Maps showing continents before they were supposedly discovered. Technologies that appear too early. The Arizona logs fit this pattern. They're not Triassic fossils, they're remnants of advanced construction from a few centuries ago at most. The silicon material suggests they were manufactured, not grown. The saw marks show they were processed. The surface positioning means they're recent, not ancient. But why silicon? Modern technology uses silicon for semiconductors, computer chips, solar panels. It's valued for electrical properties. Could an advanced pre-modern civilization have used silicon for similar purposes? The logs could be structural elements, power transmission systems, or energy storage. Their size and placement across the landscape might indicate a grid or network. The different mineral inclusions might have functional purposes, creating varying electrical or optical properties in different logs. This is speculation, but it's based on what the physical evidence actually shows, rather than forcing it into the petrified forest narrative. The establishment's resistance to alternative interpretations is predictable. Accepting that these aren't petrified trees means accepting that advanced technology existed in North America before it was supposed to. It means standard archaeological timelines are wrong. It means the Triassic dating is wrong, which challenges radiometric dating methods. It means Native American oral histories about stone trees might be literally true, rather than metaphorical. The academic and institutional investment in the current explanation is too large to overcome with simple observation. So the saw marks get explained as crystal fractures, the regular dimensions get ignored, the chemical anomalies get dismissed as interesting but not significant. The surface positioning gets attributed to erosion despite the mechanical problems this creates. There are logs that show clear evidence of burning, charred surfaces, on crystalline quartz. Standard explanation says the charring is from ancient forest fires before petrification, but burning wood creates carbon. That carbon should be incorporated into the petrifaction process. It should be distributed throughout the log's structure. Instead, it's concentrated on surfaces, suggesting the silicon material was exposed to fire after it was already crystalline. What burns hot enough to char quartz? Industrial processes, advanced metallurgy, catastrophic energy release, not forest fires. Some logs are hollow, perfectly cylindrical hollow cores running the entire length. Petrification doesn't create hollow cores in solid trunks. Trees can develop hollow centers from rot, but the hollow is irregular and doesn't run the full length. These hollows are manufactured. They're too perfect, too consistent. They serve a purpose, perhaps fluid transport, perhaps electrical conduit, perhaps structural weight reduction. The purpose is unclear, but the manufacturing is obvious. The Park Service doesn't allow sampling for independent analysis. Researchers requesting core samples or chemical analysis of specific anomalous features are denied. The stated reason is preservation. The logs are protected national treasures and can't be damaged. But this prevents verification of the claims made about them. If they're truly petrified wood from the Triassic, independent analysis would confirm it. The refusal to allow analysis suggests there are uncertainty about what that analysis might reveal. Local Navajo traditions are more interesting than the official geology. The stone trees weren't always stone. They turned to stone at a specific time during a great disaster. The timing varies in different tellings, but clusters around a few centuries ago, not millions of years. The disaster involved fire from the sky, shaking earth, and darkness. Standard interpretation treats this as mythological explanation for volcanic activity. But what if it's historical memory of an actual event, a cataclysm that destroyed advanced civilization and left these logs as remnants? The wood grain patterns might not be wood at all. They could be manufacturing artifacts from whatever process created these silicon structures. If you're extruding or forming silicon material, you'd create linear patterns from the process. These patterns would look like wood grain if you didn't know what you were looking at. Early investigators assumed wood because that's what tree-shaped objects should be. The assumption became fact through repetition. No one seriously questioned whether these might be manufactured objects, because the technology required seemed impossible for the supposed time period. The regular spacing of some logs is another clue. In certain areas of the park, logs are positioned at consistent intervals, not random scatter, but deliberate placement, like structural supports for something that no longer exists. Remove the structure, leave the supports, and you get the pattern we see. What rested on these supports? What structure was large enough to need 60-meter crystalline quartz beams? The scale is beyond anything we associate with ancient cultures, but it's consistent with advanced civilization operating at industrial scales. The tourist industry around the petrified forest has economic incentive to maintain the petrified wood narrative. Millions visit annually. They buy polished pieces in gift shops. The mystique of ancient forest turned to stone is marketable. Acknowledging these as manufactured silicon artifacts would complicate the story, make it harder to explain, possibly reduce tourist interest. Economic considerations reinforce academic conservatism. Neither wants to examine too closely what these formations actually are. The evidence is there for anyone willing to look without presuppositions. Saw marks in crystalline quartz, regular dimensions inconsistent with biological growth, chemical compositions wrong for petrified wood, surface positioning that contradicts the claimed age, hollow cores that serve no biological function, burn marks on stone, orientation patterns suggesting placement not natural fall. Each piece of evidence can be explained away individually. Collectively, they point to manufactured silicon structures from an advanced civilization that existed recently enough to not be buried, was destroyed catastrophically, and has been systematically misclassified as fossil wood to avoid confronting implications about lost technology and hidden history. The petrified forest logs aren't wood that turned to stone over millions of years through gradual natural geological processes. They're manufactured silicon structures from an advanced global civilization we're not supposed to acknowledge existed. The saw marks prove processing. The regular dimensions prove manufacturing. The chemical composition proves advanced materials science. The surface positioning proves recent placement, The official explanation requires ignoring all of this evidence. The Tartaria explanation accounts for what we actually observe. The logs are remnants of something we've forgotten. Evidence of capabilities we've lost, proof that the history we're taught is incomplete at best, and deliberately falsified at worst. They're not trees, they never were. Their technology we can barely understand, lying in plain sight, misclassified as fossils because accepting what they really are would require rewriting everything we think we know about human civilization and its true age.